just to start off with, I'm a blogger, a full-time blogger. And I blog on a commercial basis, so coming to speak at a not-for-profit organisation is really exciting for me, because it's also a passion of mine, is supporting not-for-profits. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how my experience of blogging and my interest in some of the not-for-profit stuff that I've had long interest in collided recently. So really what I want to look at tonight is this question: can social media be used for social good, and if so, how? And I'm going to break this presentation down into two parts. The first part, I want to tell you about a trip I took recently to Tanzania with a not-for-profit called CBM. And I want to tell you a little bit about what we did and the backstory for that trip. And then I want to give you some tips on blogging that I've picked up over the last 9 or so years of blogging. Before I do, I want to show you a quick video which we shot in Tanzania. And just to give you a really quick snapshot, we went to Tanzania for a week and spent a week in a disability hospital in a city called Dar es Salaam. And the object of the trip was to see what would happen if we gave the people in that hospital the access to the web to tell their story. And this is a video that we created at the end of the week, kind of just to sum it up a little bit with a few final reflections. And I want to share it partly because it is the type of content that we were sharing online, and when I talk later about the trip, hopefully it'll give you some context for that, and also just to give you a bit of visual and to help us focus in a little bit. So hopefully our sound's going to work on this. I guess one of the things that I've been reflecting upon is this idea of disability. Someone said to me, disability is not so much about the physical, it's more about not being able to do things, and often that comes from other people's attitudes. Kids and adults have talked about being secluded and being isolated by others. Whilst we've seen people have their eyes open and receive healing in being able to see, I actually feel my eyes have been open too, and a number of people have left comments on the blog saying that it's been great to have their eyes opened to what's happening here in another part of the world. One of the things that I'm really excited about is that we've been talking to Telstra about the possibility of running another trip and actually having a competition in the lead up to that trip to identify another Australian blogger to go to another part of the world. And hopefully through it we can actually build some momentum on what we've created to continue to use social media and blogging for social good. So I started blogging in 2002, November it was. I remember it well because a friend sent me a link, and I didn't delete the email like I usually do when someone sends me a link. I followed it and I landed on this site that I had no idea what it was, but it was called a blog. And no one knew what a blog was back then. Even when I told everyone that I was starting a blog because I wanted them to read it, and everyone was like, blob? You're blobbing? No one had any comprehension of what a blog was. Today, most people, I guess, have some sort of an understanding at least of it. But back then, I started on the day I found this first blog because I discovered this guy on the other side of the world writing things that I was thinking. And he had thousands of people not only reading it, but contributing back to it. And so there was this kind of community of knowledge developing around what he was talking about. And that fascinated me. I've always been interested in communication and community. And so a blog seemed a medium that could be useful for doing that. So I started my first blog on that first day. This is a picture of it. This is about 2 months into it when I got a designer to do it. I won't show you the original one because it was so ugly. I made so many mistakes on that first blog. But every mistake I made, I learnt something, and that helped me. I don't have a technical background at all. I don't really have any training in communications. I didn't know how to make text bold on my blog. I didn't know anything about what I was doing, but I started, and I'll talk a little bit more about how important that was later. These days I have a couple of main blogs. One is Digital Photography School. It's a blog about how to use cameras. It's a commercial site. It's read by about 3 to 4 million people a month. from around the world, largely the US. So it just kind of staggers me that someone who has absolutely no idea on this stuff can build an audience like that. And it's all social media, it's all blogging, the medium itself. And the other blog I have is Problogger, a blog about blogging, which is quite sad. But as it turns out, a lot of people want to learn about how to blog. And so that's been quite popular as well. And I'm also very engaged in the social media space, perhaps a little too engaged, if you ask my children. They often tell me when I'm looking at my iPhone, "Wake up, Daddy." So over the last 9 years, as I've been blogging, this question has been percolating in my mind. I come out of a background, I actually used to be a minister of a church, and I've always been interested in issues of poverty and justice and disability, the disadvantaged, all kinds of issues around that. And I've always wondered, you know, how could I take some of that passion and let it collide with what I'm doing on the blogs? In the last few years, I've done a lot of blogathons. That's one of the early ways that I kind of tried to make them collide a little bit, the passion and blogging, where I would blog for 24 hours. Every 5 minutes I would post something and try and raise money. We did a project with Oxfam where we tried to raise money for goats, and we had a goatometer on the side of the blog to show how many goats we'd raised. We did another one around the tsunami and that type of thing, and it was good. We raised nice money, but I've always wondered, is there some other way of actually not just raising money, but highlight the issue, start a conversation around some of these sorts of things? You see, blogging for me has given me a voice. It's like someone's put this massive microphone in front of me. And I find that quite remarkable because I see myself as a very ordinary person. I'm a suburban dad. I don't do the dishes enough. I don't forget to put out the rubbish. I'm a very normal, average, perhaps below average person, and yet people come and listen to what I've got to say. And a lot of it's about the social media. It's about this microphone. And I guess I've always wondered what would happen if we put this same microphone in front of someone like Amina. Now, I met Amina, she's about 11 years of age. I met her in the hospital in Tanzania where I was walking through the orthopaedic ward, and something about her caught my eye. I still don't really know what it was. She had just this quiet, wise little smile. And she was kind of watching me, and so I asked the translator, can we sit down and have a chat to her? And for over half an hour, we just talked about each other's stories. I told her a little bit about me, and she told me a little bit about her background. And one of the first things I noticed about her physically, apart from her smile, were her knees were they're almost like leather. And at first I thought it was some sort of skin condition, but what I discovered was that Amina's basically, to get anywhere to anywhere, had to drag herself on her hands and knees for the last 7 or 8 years since she's been able to be mobile. So she's faced incredible challenges. She was born with quite severely bowed legs, and so she's never been able to stand or really lift herself up. But she's dragged herself to school, literally dragged herself to school for 7 years. And there's been no one to take her, so she's decided that she's going to do it. She's got incredible determination, stamina. And as I talked to her, I asked her, you know, what's your dream? And in my small-mindedness, I thought her dream would be to walk, but her dream was much bigger than that. She said, I want to be a doctor, and I will be a doctor because I want to help children like me. So Amina has a story to tell, and it's an incredible story. It really inspired me, and I think about her every day since I met her. What would happen if we put the microphone in front of her? She doesn't have that same access that we do to social media, not yet at least. What would happen if we put the microphone in front of her? So that's the question I've been asking over the last 9 years. And so when CBM, who's an international organisation, they do a lot of work with people with disabilities around the world, traditionally a lot with sight-related disabilities. They do over 700,000 cataract operations every year. So it's fairly large-scale work. When they came to me and said, hey, how about you come and see one of our projects? I was like, of course, like that's a no-brainer. It's what I've been wanting to do for years. And so in February we took off and we went to Dar es Salaam where we met Hadija, who's been living with fistula for 30 years. We met Amina, who is the little girl I just told you about, and Sharifu, who's had 2 cataracts, and I was able to witness his surgery. And we spent time in the fistula ward. Fistula is an issue that I didn't really know much about, partly because in Australia it doesn't really happen that much because maternal health is so amazingly high here. I won't go into all the details of it, but basically these women become incontinent through an obstructed labour, and they quite often become socially isolated. They become the lepers of their society. And I met women who literally had been forced to leave their villages and live on the fringes of their villages, whose family had left them. And I also met women who had had an intervention, who'd had a surgery, a relatively simple surgery, that had cured it, and the impact upon their lives was just staggering. The smiles on their faces and the stories that they told of renewed friendships and renewed social interaction was amazing. I was incredibly daunted about the idea of going into a maternal health situation and talking to people from a different culture and being a guy, but I was just amazed by their openness and willingness to talk about the issue. We spent time in the eye ward. I went into surgery with a couple of babies and saw their actual surgeries take place. Amazing how quickly a cataract can be removed, 10 to 15 minutes in the woman there on the bottom. Her name was Fatima. And it was amazing to think about her life being transformed. I didn't talk to her before her operation, but talked to her afterwards, and she told me that the main impact of her surgery would be upon her family, who didn't have to care for her anymore. She was almost blind, so one of her grandchildren had to give up school for a day to stay with her every day, and they had a roster. So it was impacting her family's income, it was impacting her grandchildren's education. And I saw her have her eye patch removed the next day, and she had 20/20 vision up to 20 metres within 24 hours. And we spent time in the orthopaedic ward where we met Amina, where we met kids with club foot, kids with quite severe burns. They do a lot of work with cerebral palsy. They see 200 new patients every day in this hospital, and they all rock up unannounced, just at the door. Here I am. It's just amazing. And lastly, we met kids with cleft palate, and that kind of was confronting for me because my godson was born with a cleft palate. It was actually identified that he would have it before he was born, and his surgery was booked before he was born. In Tanzania, 2 out of 3 children with a cleft palate die in the first year of their life. So just the contrasts between here and there were amazing. And so the trip, we spent every day in the hospital meeting probably about 100 different patients and staff and interviewing them. We took video, we took lots of photos, and we spent a lot of time just in conversation. And then every night we returned to our hotel, and that's when the work part of it started, and we would spend the next 4 or 5 or 6 hours till 2 or 3 in the morning uploading content to the web of the stories that we'd seen. And it was a tiring week, but in the scheme of things, the tiredness disappears, and it's, I guess, what impact it has on you that lasts. In terms of results, CBM's goal was not to raise money. They simply wanted to open a conversation and see what would happen. Their site normally has between 100 and 150 people visited a day, and we had 52,000 visit over the 5 days that we were actually in the hospital. Their server crashed for 24 hours in the middle of it, so it probably would have been a little higher. So there was a lot of numbers, but for me, I guess the impact of the trip was the conversations that came out of it, and the conversations that still happen months later. I've had so many emails from people who followed the journey, who have now been volunteering their time to different organisations or are going on similar trips as well. Emails from people who have family members or who themselves have similar disabilities to the ones that we talked about in the trip, who I guess they reflected back, many of them, how lucky they felt. It was a bizarre thing to get those sorts of emails because I know how much of a challenge it has been for many of them, but just the contrast, I guess, between what often we have here and what they have in Tanzania. So that was the trip, and I wanted to share my experience of blogging for social good, and for the rest of the presentation I want to give you some just general tips on blogging, but I thought maybe I'd pause to allow some questions, and if you want to take the rest of the session just in questions about this trip, I'm happy to do that. But what's after this is some more tips on blogging and social media. So I've been asked to give you a microphone. I'm not sure where it is, but are there any questions? I can repeat them back for the recording. Yeah. Yeah, so the question was, how do we manage the permissions in interacting with people? We had forms that we had everyone sign. We had a translator with us so people actually understood what they were signing. The hospital that we were there with, they're called CCBRT. and they were, really good on, they had a very long list of policies that we had to read through and interact with, and so yeah, that was a big part of it. And we were very aware of that. Yeah. Yep.
And I was also wondering, were you able to show the people whose story was on the actual blog? Like, were they able to see
yeah, a couple we did. There was a sort of a 24-hour turnaround. So the question was, were the people that we interviewed able to see the stories that we put up? And a couple we were actually able to do that with, and that was kind of nice. And we were able to show a lot of the photos that we took as well. We took something like 3,000 photos over the 5 days. So a lot of that went back to CCBRT for them to use in different ways as well. Okay, well, I'll pause it again at the end for some more questions, but what I wanted to move on, if you do want to see the blog, it's theblog.cbm.org.au. They have since been blogging on it, so if you want to see what we did during the week, I think we did about 20 posts in the lead up to and while we were there. You can see it there. Go back to February, March, and you'll see what happened then. It's Yep. So the question was, how did we start that relationship, CBM and I? It was kind of a bizarre random meet. We met at a tweet up, as all good marriages do these days. Marcus, who was their digital marketing guy, and I just happened to be at this thing. It was a tweet up for not-for-profits in the eastern suburbs. Who knows that you could have a tweet up that focused, but there was about 30 or 40 people there. And I think I presented a little bit, and he sort of came up afterwards and said, let's have a coffee. I knew of CBM previously, sort of vaguely, so I was kind of open to that relationship. Ironically, the same week I was approached by another charity to do a trip to Haiti. So the 2 requests I've had in 9 years all came in the 1 week. It's quite bizarre. Yeah. Yeah, so the question is around charging. I did it for free, I just did it. They paid my airfare. I didn't want them to, but they kind of, for their insurance purposes or something, that had to all be somehow covered. So it didn't cost me anything apart from my time. But yeah, I would have done it for free, but don't all ask me to do it for free. Yep. Yep. So the question was CBM's motivations really to do it. They obviously do want to increase their revenue, but it certainly wasn't a goal of the trip specifically. We didn't mention money at all. I don't think it was mentioned on the blog, although we linked to their site, which does have a call to action around that. It was simply to see what would happen, I think. They have been wanting to do social media, and they were launching their social at the same time, their strategy around that. So I think it was just partly to see what would happen and to see if there might be some way of continuing it, which there is. They're going to do it on a yearly basis now. Yeah. Okay, we might just move through onto some actual tips. So it's kind of hard to give tips for social media. I know I've looked at some of the other sessions and there have been others, so hopefully this will connect with what others are doing. And keep in mind, I come from a background of blogging on a commercial basis. So I sell ebooks off my blogs and I run advertising on it, so I'm kind of coming from a slightly different perspective. But a lot of the principles I think are still much the same, and so hopefully something in this will be helpful to you. The first thing I'll say is you've got to start. I was having a conversation with a good friend last week, and she sat me down and she said, Darren, I've got this great idea for a blog. And my son has autism. He's 12 now, and I feel like we're kind of coming a little bit out of what's been a really difficult time. And I want to share some of the stories, and I want to share some tips, and I want to just encourage people who are in a similar situation. She reeled off 30 or 40 different post ideas that she had, and she's obviously convinced that a blog could be a useful thing. And I agreed with her. But as she was talking, I was thinking, this sounds really familiar, and it rewound back in my mind. And we'd had almost the identical conversation 2 years before. And I guess my reflection back to her, I know she's a busy person, she's got a lot of very good excuses for not having done it, but a lot of people do have excuses and too many excuses. One of her excuses was, I wanted to launch it properly, I want it to look great, and I want it to be on the right domain, and it was almost like she had these massive dreams. And so I told her again the story of me starting on the wrong domain with a terrible design, not knowing anything about blogging, and yet I'd started. And so I guess I'd encourage, whether you're an individual or an organisation, that the time is now to start. A lot of people say it's too late, everyone else is doing it, who's going to listen to me? There's plenty of space for everyone in this. In fact, when competitor blogs start in the areas that I'm interested in, I actually think that's a fantastic opportunity for us to all widen our audience and increase our networks and cooperate. The blogosphere is not a very competitive place, although there are elements of it. It's a cooperative place, and so your competitor can actually help you to grow, and you can help them as well. And it's been interesting to see in the not-for-profit space other organisations contacting CBM to learn from the trip as well, and they've been very open to share that. So I encourage you, it's not too late, and the time is now to start, even if you don't understand it all. One of the things I wish I'd known earlier was that really social and blogging is all about listening. It's a great broadcast tool, you can talk to a lot of people, but you're so much more effective in what you say if it's based upon what you hear. It's like all good conversations. We don't like to talk to people who just talk about themselves or who assume that they're saying something that's relevant to us. We love to talk to people who pause and who listen and who ask questions, and the same is true in social. When I first got on Twitter, it's probably 3 or 4 years ago, I was actually a bit late to Twitter. I was very suspicious of it. I didn't know why anyone would want to talk in 140 characters. I didn't get it at all. I wanted to work on my own site, not someone else's. But I eventually came around to the idea, but for the first month of being on Twitter, I didn't tweet once. All I did was follow other people and listen and watch how they used it. Social media can be like going to another planet. People speak a different language, there's a whole different etiquette, there's a whole different system of hierarchies. So take your time and just start, but start by listening, and you'll learn so much. When I eventually did start, I started a lot more effectively because I'd watched what other people were doing well and badly. Get to know your reader. It kind of sounds like listening, but what I do when I start a new blog is develop a reader profiles, and I'll show you a couple of those. When I started my photography blog about 4 or 5 years ago now, I created these personas of the type of reader that I wanted to reach. The blog didn't have any readers at all because I actually hadn't started blogging, but I imagined in my mind, and I put it into a Word document, who the people were that I wanted to reach. And I even went as far as giving them a name and a photo. I found them on Google Images. I have no idea who they really are, but I talked about these 3 different types of readers. You see Grace there, she's a mamarazzo, 99% of her photos are of her kids, so she's taking portraits. She's wondering, which camera should I buy at the moment? Should I buy a digital SLR or a point and shoot? Started to list her problems, her challenges, her dreams, the resources that she would be buying already in photography, where she was hanging out online, you know, was she on Flickr or was she on Facebook? The more you know about the type of person you want to reach, the more equipped you are to write for them, because suddenly you've got all their problems and challenges in mind. So there's 20 or 30 posts already. You know where to go and look for them online to connect with them. So I discovered that they were all on Flickr, a photo sharing site. These days they're all on Facebook, so we're developing a presence on Facebook as well. And it's also good for understanding what makes them stay on your site as well. What would they be interested in? Are they interested in just learning articles, how-to stuff? Or are they there for community? Do they want to show off? Do they, you know, why are they there? So it helps you to build their community. The more you know about your readers, the better equipped you'll be. And so these days we still develop reader profiles, but we base those on our actual readers. We survey them and we get a lot of information from our readers by just having a survey built into an autoresponder that we have. So we send out a weekly newsletter, and after 3 months of joining that newsletter, you get a little email saying, thanks for being a part of our community. We'd love to know more about what is facing you, your problems and your issues, and who you are. And it's amazing, about 30% of people will give us that survey, and that's where all our article ideas come from. I want to talk about 3 I's of blogging that I try and do in my posts, and these are the 3 reasons that I think most people go online. Firstly, they go online for information, so we inform. And this is why I got online in the first place. I didn't think that the internet would ever be a social place. This is like 10 years ago. I was researching articles for essays that I was writing. And so the bulk of what I do is give people information. And people want all kinds of information. They want how-tos, they want news, they want to learn, is this bump on my cheek, you know, cancerous? They're there for all kinds of information. And so give them information. But information alone isn't really enough for most people. Most people also want some inspiration. And a lot of people going online, I think, because they're bored, that they kind of have time to fill in. That's what I do in the evenings. My wife sits on the couch surfing at bowden.co.uk clothes shopping, and I sit on there looking at funny videos on YouTube. We're kind of there to do something that kind of fills in the time, and we're looking for some inspiration. So on the CBM blog that we did while we were away, we did information type posts. We talked about who CBM was, we talked about issues of fistula, cataract, and we gave people that background information, but we also told stories, and the stories kind of hit the heart, information hits the head. And lastly, people are going online increasingly for interaction, and a blog is the ideal place for that. People don't go online just to get information anymore, they're there to belong. They want a sense of belonging, a sense of community, a sense of participation. So the more posts that you can do that bring that out, the better. If you go to my photography site, you'll see on a weekly basis we do an assignment, and we say, go and take photos on the theme of red, and 500 people will go away and take photos of red things, and they come back and share them. It's a very interactive thing. People like to show off, they like to see what other people are doing. So asking questions, giving people little bits of homework to do, and then getting them to come back is really powerful. What I find is if you've got the information, the inspiration and the interaction, you're kind of hitting different learning types, personalities, and a lot of us like all of those things. It kind of gives lots of different reasons to keep coming back to your site. This kind of comes into the inspiration, but it's the storytelling that I found most powerful, particularly in the CBM blog. It was the stories that people commented most upon. The other thing that they loved on the CBM blog that we did a daily image post where we just posted 10 images of the day. So visual stories as well are really important. They hit the heart and give people, I don't know, people connect to a story more than they do to information. A lot of bloggers just have an idea, slap it out on a Word document and put it on their blog, and they don't really give much thought to really crafting it. The posts I find that you stew on a little bit, that you let marinate in your mind, and then that you take to the next level are often the ones that people connect with the most. Take a little bit more time with the title of your post. Don't just give the most obvious one. Think about, you know, how are people going to react to that? Is it going to make them want to read the first line? Is it going to intrigue them? Is it going to tell them what the article's about? Give them, just hone that title. Your first line is the next most important part. You need to really think about the opening line. My wife, when she met me, said, "Hi Michael, it's nice to meet you. And my name's Darren." So that wasn't the best first line. I kind of was a bit, okay, this chick she's not really that interested. And it took us another 4 months before we kind of connected again, and then she made a much better impression. So first impressions really count. Your title, the opening line. Think about how you can illustrate your post. Post with images in them, just come alive. I have a photography site, so we use images all the time, but even posts that aren't about photography on my other sites, we always try and get an image in there somehow because it draws people in. It gives them a visual point of interest. It grabs them. People make a decision whether they're going to read your post in the first 1 or 2 seconds that they're on the page, so you've got to do something to grab their attention. Add examples, add quotes, further reading. All of this stuff adds depth and new dimension to the post that you're writing. Rather than just writing it and then people disappear, give them something else to do at the end of your article. Here's another article you might like to read that's on a similar topic. It may not even be on your blog, but it gives them something else to do. It makes them think, hey, this person's gone to the extra level with their writing. Be personal. A lot of organisational blogs that I come across are very corporate speak, and there's a place I'm sure for corporate speak. I'm not really sure what it is, but blogs I think need to be personal. I think they come alive when they're more personal, and not just personally written, but using personal mediums as well. I resisted going into video for a long time. I kind of felt a bit uncomfortable with it. I didn't think anyone would have the time to sit and watch a 3-minute video. But the first day I put a video on my blog, Problogger, it was the first day that I discovered there was probably about half my readership who'd never left a comment before, but they loved video, and they started coming out of the woodwork and leaving comments. They could hear your voice. They realised for the first time he's an Aussie. Body language, all kinds of stuff. It really brings it alive. I try and weave into some of my posts kind of almost personal information even, without going too much. I don't talk about my kids' names, but I certainly tell stories of life being in a family, and use them to illustrate things that I'm talking about. Be playful. The blogosphere, social media is very forgiving as long as you are transparent and you're not trying to manipulate people. People really respond well to humour. Now you've got to be a bit careful, because I know not everyone's humour is the same, but you can be a little bit playful in the way that you write and the things that you do. I play an April Fool's joke on my audience every year on Problogger. Last year Google bought me, and it was amazing how many people were sucked into that. But people have come to expect Darren does April Fool's jokes, and they log in on April 1st to see what it is. So that playfulness can work. One of the most popular posts on Problogger was 5 things you don't know about my dad, the Problogger. And it was written in the voice of my 2-year-old, who obviously can't write, but people responded to that kind of, it was slightly personal, had a picture of him poking his eyes above the screen of my laptop, so no one saw his face, but it was kind of this playfulness in it, and it really worked quite well. Be passionate. I'm assuming most not-for-profits are trying to motivate people to be passionate about what they do. You have to take the lead in that. People aren't going to be passionate about what you're doing unless you show them that you are as well. People catch passion. They don't necessarily always get convinced to be passionate. They need to see someone else who's passionate, and they catch that. The posts that I found are most effective quite often for me are the ones I've written either angry, really excited, slightly silly and hyperactive, like it's where that emotion bubbles up. Now I always go back and edit the angry ones a little bit or get someone else to read it, but it's when you're passionate about something that people catch it. When you're writing about something you don't actually really believe in, people can sense that, and conversely they won't come back. So be passionate about your writing. You're obviously passionate about what you do, let it show. I know in some organisations the passion gets edited out by layers of people having to give approval to things, and that can be tricky, but yeah, be passionate. A lot of people ask me, how do I get started? How do I find my first readers? It really is about leveraging what you've already got. So for me, when I started my first blog, it was, Mum, I started a blog. Like the only real relationships I had were my family and friends, so I didn't use them, but I leveraged those relationships. As organisations, I'm sure you've all got clients, donor lists, newsletters, letterheads, email signatures. You all have a presence somewhere, whether it be advertising or something simple like a business card. They're all opportunities to draw people to your blog or your social media presence. And we're seeing more and more companies incorporating, little Twitter symbols and Facebook symbols in their advertising. So use those symbols that people are now learning what they mean. They know what the little T means, or they know what the little F means. Yesterday I had an email from an author saying, I'm launching my book next week. And so I got on Twitter today and I started my first account, and I want to use Twitter to launch my book because I heard you can. And it was kind of sad in some ways, because I just thought, man, if you'd got on Twitter when you started writing your book and started involving others in the writing of your book and giving them snippets of it and asking them for their input in it, you would have build a network that you could have then sold your book to. So the principle really is you need to get in early, even if you don't know what you're going to use it for down the track. Build your network before you need it. Be yourself. This was a photo someone photoshopped of me. It's now the #1 image in Google Images for my name, which is a little sad, but I don't look good in a turban. I'm never going to go the turban option. I'm me. When I first started my first blog, I found this other blog that I really liked the style of. The guy would write in a very kind of heady, thoughtful way, and I tried to write for a month in his kind of voice, and I discovered very quickly that I just couldn't pull that off. I'm a heart guy. And so I had to learn to find my voice and to be myself. This is true, I think, for organisations as well who engage bloggers or who give a staff member the job of blogging. You need to allow them to be themselves and to find their voice, and that can take a little bit of time as they experiment with different ways of blogging, but eventually it does kind of click. Persist. This is not an overnight thing. I've lost count of the amount of times people have emailed me and said, I've quit my job to become a pro blogger. What domain should I get? It's just too late. It's a long-term thing. You're not going to get rich overnight in blogging, but you're also not going to build an influence in whatever field overnight. It is something that you need to just start and do and do and do. And the momentum does grow. That's what I've found with blogs is it feels really hard. It's the first 100 posts are the hardest, the first 1,000 readers are the hardest, but it once you've got the momentum growing, it actually does speed up. And I put this one in because I do speak to a lot of bloggers who don't have a life because social becomes everything to them and they become so obsessed by it. But I also speak to organisations who put all their eggs in the social basket. And Twitter's the new thing, so we're going to give up all the other things that we do. The other things that you do are still going to be effective, so I'd encourage you to go into it, I guess, with balance, and hopefully it'll be even more effective by doing that. Yeah. I think we've got an actual microphone now. Shai, do you want to run the mic? Can you? Oh, okay. Sorry, go Richard.
Darren, from someone who's never blogged and thought tweets or tweeting and Facebook's the mindset, how do you actually blog? Is this only done on an iPhone or do you do this on a computer?
Okay, so blogging generally is a longer form. So Twitter is 140 characters. It's like an SMS message, which you can do from a computer. But a blog post is generally a longer form thing. So I generally do it from a laptop. I have friends who do it from an iPad. But yeah, it's generally a Mac thing. No, or a PC thing. Yeah. Yep.
How do you still have something to say after 2 years? So that you just don't run out of...
Yeah, it is a real challenge. There's a whole heap of techniques that I use. I use mind mapping quite a bit. One of the good things that I do is once you do have a few readers, you start getting comments, hopefully. About 1% of your readers will comment, if that. So don't expect heaps. But from the comments generally come questions, I find, or ideas, which I then bounce off. So quite often I'll mind map a question and then come up with another 5 posts or a series of posts that could run off that. The other thing I'd say is after a couple of years, you may cycle through your readers. Generally, readers will have a life cycle. On Problogger, I generally notice people read Problogger religiously for 12 months. Now, I see them, like they start at the first post and they go right through, or they'll comment on every single post and then they kind of get on their feet or they give up blogging or they move on to something else. So not everyone was there when you wrote your first post, so you can go back to some of the ideas that you've done before and do update posts or even republish them with updates as well. The other thing I do is bring in guest posters as well and try and find other voices that people haven't had before and bring in their experience. Some people see that as a bit lazy, but I actually think it adds to the conversation because I've only got one perspective. So most of my blogs these days have multiple authors for that reason. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I just want to know what are some of the disadvantages or the pitfalls that we have to pay attention to before we entering blogging with others. In some cases, youngsters who enter blogging, sometimes they are hurt in one way or another because people, just send it unfriendly or even scandalous messages. And so what is your advice? Thank you.
I think it's really important if you're blogging personally, but probably also an organisation, if you've got employees or people actually doing it, is to think about the boundaries of what you will and won't share. So my wife and I, we talked about the fact that we don't want her name mentioned on the blog, we don't want my kids' names mentioned on the blog, so there's sort of some boundaries there. There's some things I don't talk about. I don't talk about my health or, you know, anything like that like a medical insurer could, you know, manipulate later for something, or there's a whole heap of different boundaries around that. One of the traps I think a lot of bloggers fall into is being, one easy way to get traffic to your blog is to be controversial. And a lot of bloggers fall into the trap of being the snarky blogger, and then they think later they'll turn into someone that people respect. Unfortunately, you become known as what you start out, and you also attract people commenting in a similar vein to what you write. So, yeah, just think about the tone that you bring to your blog, because that'll be reflected in the type of reader that you have on your blog as well. Yep. So the question was how to make money from it. I mind mapped it recently, and I came up with about 60 different ways. Most bloggers start out by selling ads on their blog. Google gives you a system of putting some code in and they'll serve ads. I generally sell ads, but I also promote my own products. So I sell ebooks. Other people would sell courses, or themselves as a consultant, or training or workshops or that type of thing. So there's a heap. I think the best way to make money from a blog is to make money because of your blog. So you build up a profile and an audience, and then you leverage that to take people to your business or to a service that you have. Yep. Yep.
Is it important to have a posting schedule in terms of how often you post or how regularly you post?
Yeah, I always say regularity is probably more important than frequency. Having said that, probably once a year isn't regular enough. I think there's something to be said for a higher frequency, because you have multiple connecting points with people. So the more you see your friends, the better friends you become with them. And so the more you post and people read you, the more they actually feel connected to you. I was at a conference in the US recently, and at the end of my presentation, a woman sprinted down and hugged me that I had no idea who she was, and it was the fact that she'd read my blog every day, every morning for 3 years. So it's that regularity builds trust and relationship with people. So yeah, I try and aim for at least twice a week, I would say. I try for daily or twice a day. Yeah. So maybe, have we pretty much out of time? I don't know. We got one more? Yeah. Okay.
For a medium-sized agency that's growing, is there a point where you recommend having 2 blog profiles where, you want to segment that?
Yeah. So the question is about having multiple blogs in an organisation. Yeah. I don't know what specific point, but I guess one thing I would say on that is I'd rather have a blog for a certain purpose than have a blog that does everything that the organisation wants to say. So a blog that does customer service, marketing, messages from the CEO, staff profiles may not work so well because people don't really know why they should keep showing up. So you may want to segment it, I guess, once the need to communicate grows. Yeah, I don't know what the point actually is though. It's probably more about your ability to sustain the blogs than anything, because they can take quite a bit of work to write and moderate and everything. Yeah. Last question. Yep. Sorry, I've ignored that side of the room.
For an organisation, should you have one person doing the blog all the time, or can you have multiple voices coming in regularly? Because that would be more sustainable.
Yeah. I think either can work. The beauty of having one person is that you can keep a consistent voice. You can keep on topic perhaps a little bit more, and you as the blogger are more aware of everything that's happening on the blog, so all the comments coming in. But having multiple voices certainly adds to the diversity of what's being shared and perhaps the expertise as well. So I quite like multiple author blogs as long as you've got someone coordinating and who knows everything that's going on, so you don't get kind of mixed messages and things. So on my blogs I have an editor in each one who kind of looks after all the guests and multiple authors. So yeah, I'd probably have an editor who's kind of in charge. Buck stops with.